So, a movie about the descendants of Lizzie Borden? Okay, let's talk about it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Movie Emporium spoiler-filled discussion / review for The Inhabitants, the newest film from director Jerren Lauder. Okay, as I always say, this is a spoiler-filled discussion, so I will be talking about major plot details of this movie. I also do a non-spoiler review first, so, you can kind of get an idea what I think of this, and then you can go watch it, and then come back for my spoiler discussion. But, as I always say, just be warned that there is spoilers in my spoiler discussion for this spoiler review, So the story of the Inhabitants revolves around a character named Tara, who's played by Odessa. She's an individual that is, no spoilers, it's in the trailer, a descendant of Lizzie Borden in some form or fashion. And in the process, she's a typical high school student, but she's having flashbacks or kind of, dreams and kind of nightmares that she is killing her family, that she is inhabiting a curse of Lizzie Borden herself. And in the process, somebody is going around town murdering people, so she becomes a suspect of the situation, as well as trying to deal with her family, which is having issues in their own right. But it's a story about her trying to figure out not only what these dreams and nightmares are persisting, but also trying not to be the main suspect of a murder situation. So I have to lay this out on the table firsthand. I didn't know anything about this movie till I was sent a review copy for it, thanks to the company who sent it for me. So, take the review as it is. But I didn't know anything about this movie. I didn't know it was coming on VOD. I didn't know anything about it at all. So when I read the synopsis for it, and, I had the opportunity to review it, I'm like, cool. It's a Lizzie Borden story. It's the idea of the descendants of Lizzie Borden and kind of the concept of using that as a basis for a movie. The Lizzie Borden story is a very interesting one. It's a very dark story. The fact that Lizzie Borden was acquitted shows kind of like how different today's society when it comes to the justices compared to back then. It's the whole concept of DNA and stuff like that. Even though she got acquitted, there's an idea that she was probably did it. It's that type of thing. But her story has become legend and myth and stuff like that. But, I was still intrigued to watch this. I always like a horror film or something of that nature, which I've never heard of before, because a lot of times they're very, very surprising, and they're actually become a little bit better than what you expect. But once again, I knew nothing about this film. So after watching this film in a non-spoiler sense, my non-spoiler review, it's fine. It's good. It's not a terrible movie. It's not the best movie in the world. It's a movie that, uses the concept of Lizzie Borden and descendants, pretty interestingly. Just the idea and concept of the descendants and being affected by the curse of Lizzie Borden and what she did, or apparently what she did. But it's also mired by problems, especially with the story arcs and storytelling. Some of the characters don't make any sense in this movie. It leads down a path that I just completely found laughable, to be fairly honest. And it really feels like it's a movie that, even though it's an hour and 40 minutes long, feels like it's disjointed in a lot of respects. It's still a movie that I feel is entertaining for what it's worth. It definitely has some messages that are worth, being kind of intrigued by, I guess you could say. It definitely delves into some things that, people deal with on a daily basis when it comes to psychology and psychosis and mentality and stuff like that. The idea of the way the world works and so on and so forth. And this is not trying to spoil anything, but it definitely has an interesting message to it, which is what horror films in a lot of aspects do, is just trying to drive home something, that can be really horrifying, but really be kind of thought-provoking in a lot of respects. It's just led down a path that I just found really infuriating. And I feel like the movie has a lot of potential that just squanders in certain kind of storylines that play out in the movie. And I just, that kind of is an unfortunate thing, I guess you could say. It's something I was expecting a little bit more out of, and I was expecting something interesting, but it just kind of falters and stuff like that. But it also has Dermot Mulroney and, of course, Leslie Bibb in it, who are what I would call A-list actors, but they're actors that can allow a film to get produced because they have their full weight behind it. They're fine in the movie. They play a couple who are kind of on the edge of divorce and stuff like that, which is affecting the family, which actually becomes a big plot point in the movie. And Odessa Angian, or however you say her name, she's fine in the movie. You can tell her and Lizzie Broadway, who plays her friend and her kind of boyfriend in the movie, they're fine. They're not really kind of what I would call strong actors. They try their hardest to portray something interesting. There are things going on with Tara, the Odessa's character, who really feels like she has a lot more more purpose than she's being given, and there's a lot more strength than she's being allowed to present. It's the same thing with the other character, the Susie. I think it's Susie, Lizzie, the Broadway character, whatever her name is. Susie, I think it is. And she has a particular arc which I found really engaging, but it doesn't really lead anywhere. It doesn't lead down a path that I was really kind of engaged with. And that's just this movie's whole main problem, is it's just there's a lot of stuff that's thrown at the wall, but not all of it sticks properly. And it's just kind of a shame, because it could be a really interesting, really fun, really kind of, underground horror film that you just never really kind of see coming. It's kind of like, Hellbender or something like that. It's just, you hope it's good, but it ends up, being something that either is really good or something that's really not that great. So in the end, I expected probably, I guess because I had never heard of this movie before, I didn't really have expectations, but I was just hoping for something a little bit better than what I got. But it's still, even though that kind of mindset, is still an interesting, entertaining film that has some interesting moments. So I'll talk about that in spoilers. So, but with that said, that is my non-spoiler take of The Inhabitant. Like I said, if it were on Shudder, I would definitely recommend watching on Shudder, because Shudder puts out some pretty decent films. But it's going to be also, I think, on VOD. So, if you want to pay for it, it's not, like I said, the worst thing in the world, but it's not going to, make you feel like the greatest horror film ever. So that's what a lot of horror films do, where they're entertaining, but they're not necessarily like great films. So give it for what it's worth. But anyways, with that said, that'll end my non-spoiler review. Like I said, watch the movie first if you decide to, but if not, I'm going to do a spoiler discussion here in a second. But yeah, there you go. That's my non-spoiler review for The Inhabitant, and let's go ahead and head into spoilers. So, like I said in my non-spoiler review, The Inhabitant is a film that I knew nothing about. It's the unfortunate nature of just these movies that come on VOD and stuff like that. And I don't blame them for putting on VOD. It's just the marketing is not really prevalent in this film, which is the unfortunate nature of a low-budget horror film. But you got Leslie Bibb and you got Dermot Mulroney in this film, and you figured there would be a little more, kind of a little more push to kind of make this film a little bit more known. But I'm sure when it comes to VOD, or if it appears on Shudder or something like that it'll get a little more kind of push and stuff like that. But this film, the reason it seems like every horror film I want to do a spoiler discussion, because I like to talk about the tropes and ideas and concepts behind horror films, because they're very interesting. They always have a much more sense of purpose than a lot of dramatic films, to be fairly honest. That's what I love about horror films in every sense of the word, is they can have, the campiness nature and like the old 50s style, 60s style, films and stuff like that deal with like atomic war, or deal with the idea of like, playing God and stuff like that. And then you have like, the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which, deals with like the concept of like, taking over society, making society like cows and stuff like that. Just, the controlling nature and everything. And then you have films like this, which deal, similar like Hellbender or something like that I was talking about, which deal with mental illness. It deals with the idea of people in your life that might not be fully aware of the situation that they're in. They might be kind of confused, and the ideological sense and the psychological nature of them. And that's what this film is trying to do. It uses it in a scope of using Lizzie Borden, which of course was acquitted for the murder of her mother or stepmother and her father. But it's just a sense of like, what would happen if the descendants were like cursed with that mental illness to want to kill their family members or want to kill people. And that's what this movie is portraying. Odessa Angian's character, who plays Tara, is dealing with that through this entire movie, where she is having to deal with like these visions of like her killing her, little brother, or her killing, the mother, her killing the visions are so disturbing that it's causing her to question reality. And then on top of everything, people in this town are being murdered. For instance, Tara was involved with this, I don't know if he's Russian or Ukrainian or whatever he is, but he's this husband who became infatuated with her because she, designed costumes that very much look like, the 1800s costumes, and he was like very much in love with her. It affected their relationship, and of course, she, the wife of this guy, was the first to be murdered in this movie. So it's really interesting that maybe Tara killed her because she wanted to be with the husband and stuff like that. And then, but it becomes much more just the idea of like, is Tara really killing people? And that's when the cops become involved, which I didn't feel the cop angle was really well done. It's very kind of, it felt like an afterthought, to be fairly honest, because they kind of come in and out. There's not real purpose with them. They just kind of there to maybe solve the mystery that actually is more solved by, the Dermot Mulroney character and stuff like that. And I really felt like the cops didn't even need to be in this movie, but they kind of do need to be because there needs to be some kind of element of, did you do it? Did you not do it? That's what Tara's character is dealing with. And on top of that, Susie, which is her best friend. And on top of that, you have Susie, who's her best friend, which I think she was in love with Tara's character. It's really it's another story arc that's not really portrayed very well because Susie ends up being murdered by this killer or whatever, who we actually think could possibly be the sister of Leslie Bibb's character, who apparently maybe murdered her son or daughter or whatever, and baby with the axe. But it becomes like the idea of like, is Tara really doing this stuff? Is she really being possessed by the the ghost of Lizzie Borden? Because there are points where she sees Lizzie Borden, and it becomes kind of is she being manipulated in a lot of respects? And that's where the idea of like mental illness and stuff comes into effect, because it's been kind of shown that certain cases of psychosis and psychology and mental illness deal with the idea of like the perception of reality and how it affects you and stuff like that. And it just how things can become distorted if you're kind of just unfortunately not well, and just how people who were like killing other people, how they just view the world in a very different aspect and stuff like that. But like I said, a lot of the people who are killed in this movie have kind of they're either people that Tara knows or people that Tara are closely related to, and that's why it's why they're trying to angle it towards that perspective. At one point Tara goes to Lizzie Borden's house. She starts to become kind of possessed. It's not really possessed, it's like her mental acuity and her mental state become kind of unhinged, because like I said, she's a descendant of Lizzie Borden, her whole family is. So that idea starts to play out, the idea of kind of something truly wrong with her mind and stuff like that. And there's a really interesting scene where the proprietor or the person in control of the Lizzie Borden house, it's made to feel like that this character Tara is going to go after her and kill her, but it's really just kind of like a hallucination of vision, I guess you could say. It basically leads to the end of this movie where Tara, she has gone to the Lizzie Borden house, and her friend Susie goes to the house to pick up some clothes, and she's brutally murdered. And at that point, I'm like, oh, all right, I see where this is going, which is what I have a problem with. And Tara, runs the house, and she finds her little brother and her, I think her two younger brothers, the baby and the little kid, and they're up in the attic. And that's when you kind of come to the conclusion that Leslie Bibb has been the murderer all along, which is something I kind of saw coming, to be fairly honest. I think it was really predictable, but it's really kind of goofy, kind of funny in a lot of respects, because Tara's boyfriend gets hurt, like really physically hurt and stuff like that with an axe. Basically, we're basically supposed to feel that person and the descendant of Lizzie Borden has some kind of mental illness, so that the mother that Leslie Bibb character plays is jealous that she thinks Tara is gonna do something with like incest with her father, and that she's gonna take over the family and try and kill Leslie Bibb's character. And I just like, do you really have to add incest into this movie? Do you really have to add into the fact that can it be just Leslie Bibb's character is just the normal person that she's affected, and maybe as somebody you least expect? I mean, it felt so contrived, to be fairly honest, that Leslie Bibb was the murderer throughout the whole entire movie. And she, of course, is stopped by the police, who, like I said, don't really serve a real purpose in this movie. And I feel like that this movie is trying to make a statement about the mental illness situation, which I really appreciate, but it never fully effectively works in all aspects. It feels like it's just kind of thrown in there to be kind of a trope, to be kind of make a way to make you feel that every person in Lizzie Borden's life, or her descendants, are all crazy people, and that's just not how that works, to be fairly honest. I mean, you could have somebody who's really mentally ill in your family, or somebody who in the past has been mentally ill. That gene does spread, but it's not going to spread to every single member in the family, because as we see at the end of this movie, the young boy goes in to start the van because they're going to go to school or work or whatever, and he ends up seeing Lizzie Borden, because like I said, Tara's character sees Lizzie Borden, which means this kid is going to be now injected with the idea of Lizzie Borden, and he is now crazy. And I don't understand why that was put in there. Not every person in the family needs to be crazy, and I just feel that's weird. There's a point where Dermot Mulroney's character, the father, is called by the psychiatry ward where the sister is at, and I think they're calling to let him know the sister has escaped. But I almost felt like it was just like, okay, so we're led to believe that the sister is like breaking out of jail to kill people, or breaking out of the ward to kill people. And you have to kind of laugh at that. I don't blame the director for going there. Like I said, it's very hard to make a movie. It's very hard to make, this type of movie feel fresh and unique, because horror films are a dime a dozen, unfortunately. But I have to say, for what it's worth, I just feel that, this movie had a lot more potential than it really did. And the idea of like Leslie Bibb as the villain or the killer it's kind of laughable, to be fairly honest. I never felt at all like she had any inkling of ever being a killer. But like I said, it's that kind of pull the rug under situation, which I always kind of laugh about. It's like there are much better horror films out there, when they don't go into this scenario. And I always find myself kind of, a little kind of perturbed in a lot of respects, I guess you could say. I expected, more out of this film, and I just didn't get it. So, I mean, it's the unfortunate nature. Not all horror films are going to be good. Some are so good they're bad. There are some so bad they're good. And, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see kind of like the consensus for this movie, to be fairly honest. I think, once again, Odessa has a lot of weight put on her shoulders to kind of deal with this situation, which, when you're kind of making films early on in your career, you could kind of tell like the wet behind the ears situation. And that's what it feels like here. I think Odessa could have a pretty interesting career if she keeps going. But in the end, Leslie Bibb as a murderer is kind of stupid. The flashback stuff and the kind of jump scare moments were a little much. And actually, it's funny because the sound work in this movie, the music's really good because they use a lot of like synth pop, like 80s new wave type like music and stuff like that. It has that really cool feel to it, which I love. Like It Follows had that kind of feel to it, which I kind of love what they're doing with that kind of music tone and whatnot. But the sound work is really kind of strange because it's a really quiet movie. And then they'll do like the jump scare, the violin, like really, deep scare moment. And I kept having to turn my like sound down because it was so annoying. I would have my sound turned up because unfortunately when you get screeners, you don't have the nature of like reading it, having subtitles and stuff like that, unfortunately, which I'm not complaining about. I'm just saying like I have to turn the volume up to be able to hear what they're saying. And then he'll do that jump scare, and it's like, I'm going to ruin my speakers because I keep having to turn the sound down. And I don't feel like this movie needed like the jump scare sounds. I feel like it had some really interesting moments, or maybe turn the volume down a little bit. But that's more of a minor complaint than anything. But with that said, that is going to be my official spoiler discussion and the explains to this movie, which is The Inhabitants. I still kind of recommend it. Like I said, if you've seen it, you know what this film is now. I'm sure a lot of people are going to find this movie by watching it on VOD. But in the end, I actually, for a movie I'd never heard of before, I did want a little bit more out of this movie. I did expect a little bit more. And though it's entertaining for what it's worth, it has some fun moments, I do feel like it's disjointed. Like I said, the storyline's it's kind of squished together for an hour and 40 minutes. It doesn't make any sense, but it's really weird. So, but with that said, that is going to be my spoiler discussion for The Inhabitants. Thank you so much for watching. In the comments below, what did you think of this movie overall? How did you think about where it went, the final conclusion, all that good stuff, since it is a spoiler review? But let me know in the comments. But otherwise, if you like what you see in this video, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.